We all know 7.62 by 39 is one of the most consistent rounds Escape from Tarkov has to offer, especially rounds like BP coming out of the AKs or the Mutant. But that leaves the question, which one should you use between the Mutant and the AK? They're both incredibly strong guns, but today we're going to be looking at identical builds, some considerations between the two, and also some hidden stats that make a world of difference when choosing which one you'd rather. So let's start off by choosing the right AK to compare against the Mutant, which I believe to be one of the high-tier meta guns in the game. And we're going to be starting off here with the AK-MN. This comes in around 48,000 rubles, and we actually did a video recently comparing it to the 103. And we found out that the AKs with the fixed stock, like the AKM or the AK-MN, are actually the better alternative in the late game. So we're actually going to be comparing the hard stock AKs to the Mutant. And the reason that I choose the AK-MN is that it has one additional ergo compared to the AKM. Cannot actually purchase the Mutant until you hit max gear, and you can't also buy it off the flea market either. We'll have a look at the price as well. Compared to the 48,000 rubles, we have 138,000 rubles, so it is a little bit more significant of an investment. Alright, so if we have a look at the two side by side, completely stock, what we'll immediately notice is that the ergo on the far right here for the MK is a lot better. We're looking at 62.5 compared to the 41 of the AK-MN. One of the bigger differences, however, is we'll look over towards the vertical and horizontal recoil of both. And we'll see that the AK-MN actually has more recoil on both vertical at 113 and horizontal at 269. Nice. And this is comparison to the 107 of the MK and the 266 of the horizontal of the MK-47. So what I've done here for the sake of an easy example is I wanted to point out some of the actual real differences between the two, not just the numbers. But to keep everything as similar as possible, I actually tried to build these two as closely as possible from stock. So we can see that we're looking at 105 vertical recoil on the AK-MN, and we're also looking at 105 vertical recoil on the MK. We're going to be looking around about the same horizontal, but the AK-MN is actually going to have slightly better horizontal over the MK. Alright, so I've actually loaded PS into both of these guns, and we're going to be starting off with the AK-MN. And next up we have the MK-47 with the 50 faster fire rate. We also actually have 7.62 PS in this one as well. So we've seen these two builds side by side. They're very close, but we noticed that the AK fired a lot worse than the MK. Why is that? Well, the truth is the two aren't actually identical when it comes to hidden stats. And I'm actually going to be making another video talking about the hidden stats of recoil. It's going to be a huge video, so make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel for that. However, I did want to point out when it comes down to the hidden stats of the MK, it is actually a fair bit better. There are two reasons why the MK is actually better than the AK platform in general. The first hidden stat that makes the AKs worse than the MK is of one called convergence. And this is the force that pulls your gun downwards after firing. And it's actually worse on the AKs than it is on the MK. We can have a look here if I compare the two side by side in single shots. Now, although the vertical recoil is the same, look how long it takes for my AK to reset to the original position. Ready? And now when I switch to the MK, take a look at the difference. Now, another really interesting thing about recoil in general is the MK actually has 50 faster fire rate per minute, What this actually equals is that there are more forces pulling the gun downwards. Remember how I talked about that force that brings your barrel back to the original point of aiming called convergence? Well, that actually applies to every single shot that you fire. So if you fire more rounds per minute, then there is more force pulling your gun downwards, which actually helps compensate for the recoil quicker. That's why you'll notice that the MK-47 actually pulls back to the original point of aim quicker. Alright, so here we have an AK, and we're not going to really get in too much into the builds here today, because that's not really what this video is about. But I thought what I would do is spend a little bit of money, about 130k on this AK. So the AK itself costs 48,000. So what I want to do is try and make this AK as comparable to an MK as possible. So I'm going to be changing up the stock and spending a little bit of money here lowering that recoil. And we want to see how much that convergence stat actually matters in the grand scheme of things. So now we're seeing that I'm spending about 61,000 rubles on parts just to make this AK a little bit more usable. And now that we're spending about 60k, we're talking about around about the same amount of money that it costs to buy an MK anyway. So we're trying to compare a built-up AKMN comparative to a basically entirely stock MK-47. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Well, the truth is that convergence matters a lot more than vertical recoil. What we'll pretty much notice on every single spray is that there are 4 to 5 different rounds that land variously above the target. And sometimes this is a good thing. As you can see, the rounds at the top here might have actually been a headshot. But the truth is, vertical recoil only really matters for the first couple shots. And so because of the MK's better convergence, the spray actually evens out much quicker. And in the end, doesn't actually make an absolute difference in the grand scheme of things. So if I spend a lot of money on an AK to get that vertical recoil down, the convergence is still bad. So although the original jump distance isn't that high anymore, we are going to notice that it pulls together quite quickly. So that's where good ammos and bad ammos come in. We've seen this one ammo here that everyone uses called BP. And the really cool thing about BP is that it is an incredibly strong round that does the job against most armors you're going to be running into. BP actually says that it has +5 recoil. What that actually means in the grand scheme of things is that is an additional 5% extra recoil on your gun. Now you can actually get around this by top loading rounds like PS. You can go ahead and put something like PS in the top and then go ahead and put like 25 BP in the bottom. Now, I know that sounds counterintuitive in the grand scheme of things, but it makes a lot of difference when it comes down to the overall spray. Just to show you guys the difference, I decided to come to the range here again, but this time I decided to top load some PS. I actually have 1 in the chamber, 4 additional, and then the rest of the mag is BP. And so we're going to have a look at the difference in recoil between a full BP mag and a PS/BP mag. Now, as we can see, you're going to notice a few rounds actually go over the top of the head quite quickly. There's some on the back wall there. And that's because of the BP all in the top, giving us that additional 5% recoil. So although you have a meta build, it will make a bit of a difference. And especially with lower end AKs and MKs in general, if you actually top load bad ammo, it actually makes a huge difference when it comes down to your spray. So what if we were to run a round with negative recoil in the top of our mag instead? And there's actually a really good reason to do this. There's a round here called 7.62 by 39 US. And what we'll notice is it's not actually that much worse than PS. It has 29 pen, which is in the high 29s, which is close enough to 30, which means a lot of the time it will punch through that level 3 armor. On top of this, it also has a negative 30 recoil modifier. So in the grand scheme of things, that is a negative 30% reduction in recoil vertical wise. So that is a huge difference to make, especially in lower end AKs. So if we take that knowledge, you wouldn't probably want to run the full mag of US, as a 29 pen will sometimes let you down. And rounds like BP are so much stronger in the grand scheme of things. So what if we were to take BP, put it in the bottom of the mag, and then put US in the top? So what we'll immediately notice is that although there is a bunch of rounds here that aren't completely over the target, because of that US, it pulled our gun down a lot more, and that's a stock MK, and I don't have the highest stats by any stretch of the imagination, so you can see that it actually groups your rounds a lot better, and by the time convergence kicks in on each round that has been fired, the BP's increase in recoil doesn't really matter because the force pulling downwards is now so great. So what are my final thoughts? The truth is, the MK-47 is better than the AK platform in general. It's kind of sad to see, but I feel like maybe they need to do a little bit of a rework to the recoil systems in general. I will be working on a video for every single gun and how they're actually different from each other. Just because a gun says that it has a certain amount of vertical and horizontal recoil doesn't actually mean that it does. You can see that the MK-47 has a better convergence stat than the AK platform in general, so it doesn't matter what you do to it, it will pretty much always be better. Not to mention its faster fire rate makes a huge difference in Tarkov. This weird recoil system doesn't allow burst fire to shine, and this entire setup and the way they have it coded is a bit of a mess. But hopefully this video brought a little bit of light to you guys about the platform in general. I will be making another video talking about builds, so if you guys want some builds, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'll be doing a full AK 7.62x39 build guide, and we'll be talking about some of these stats along the way. If you found something in this video helpful, consider subscribing to the channel down below. Or consider jumping in the Discord. We have a great Discord full of really good people. If you're looking for people to play the game with, talk shit with, or just have a good time, make sure you jump into that. And as always, guys, we'll see you on the next one.